Our last item today in consolidating the previous decisions and, of course, make a determination of our year 1, 2, 3 rates for the next 3 years. So with that, can I please have us open with our karakia for today? Please join in. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tau. E hia ki ana te ātakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Kia ora, thank you everyone. I have apologies from Mike Paku and Tanya Hotmans. Are there any other apologies? There are none. Councillor Lambert's with us. Thank you. Kia ora, Councillor Lambert and Councillor Foley online. Nice to have you with us. I'll move those apologies. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor McIntosh, all those who agree say aye. Those against, carried. Conflict of interest declarations, I will take those as a carry-on from our last extraordinary meeting, unless there are any new interest declarations to be made. There are none. Can I please have a call for notices? And I believe Martin Williams, I'll invite you to share one with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I'll be brief, but I think it's only fitting that we pay tribute to one of the original councillors around this table, my dear aunt Dinah Williams, who passed away on Tuesday night peacefully. She was a councillor here in 1989 to about 1995 under Ewan McGregor's chairship. In the first term, she then went and became Hastings District Councillor for many years. She was a planning visionary in that context. She oversaw the rollout of the first generation Hastings District Plan. It was all about effects-based planning, which brought lots of challenges around the rural sector, embracing the RMA approach to that sort of thing. That district plan survives to this day in its structure under the second generation district plan. She was chair of the hearings committee. I'll come back to that in a moment. She was a visionary in another way. She initiated Hawke's Bay farm stays as in response to the removal of supplementary minimum prices in the 80s, which in turn really morphed into Venture Hawke's Bay and in turn Tourism Hawke's Bay. Just one little anecdote about my aunt. She chaired the hearings panel that approved the Craggy Range winery that we're all familiar with. I was asked by one of her daughters to appear as counsel, one of her daughter's friends to appear as counsel opposing that application. After full disclosure of my role in the case, it came as no surprise to me that the applicant wished to proceed with her as chair of that hearing, and she duly, it came as no surprise to me having heard the evidence that she duly approved Craggy Range and turned my client's case down. She was at all times a character, a visionary and an intellectual powerhouse within Hawke's Bay local government. So thank you for the time to share that.
No, thank you, Martin. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, and aroha to you and your whānau, and the brilliant work she did for local government.
Thank you.
Are there any further notices? There are none. Okay, if we turn to item 17, what I would like to do, councillors, is invite Dr. Nick Peat to provide somewhat of a summary of where we have got to in our discussions on Tuesday, provide a framework of solutions to move forward, which we can alter at will based on what we're hearing and what satisfies us to move through the item. So we'll hand it over to you, Nick.
Kia ora, Chair, and kia ora koutou, councillors, and condolences from the organisation to the Williams whānau.
Thank you.
Councillors, just to head back to Tuesday, and as a result of the provisional decisions that you took at that time, we landed at around about 22 to 23% for year one, around 13% for year two, and 7% for the final year. Those, as the papers described, were really provisional decisions until you get through the final paper, item 17. And item 17 is really all about the levers that you could choose to pull as councillors to change those rate numbers, and finally, at the end of all of it, to confirm your earlier decisions. The chair asked me to do some work with exec to really walk you through a straw person version of what you could do to pull those levers, not intended by me to be replacing your decision making or to be a final solution, but just to give you an idea about how the levers that sit in item 17 could work. So with your leave, Chair, I'll take members through that in a bit of detail. So item 17 essentially covers 5 critical levers that the council have got, some short-term levers and some longer-term levers. And those are covered in paragraph 7, really. They relate to the discussions you've had around rates remissions. They relate to the potential to request a special dividend from the holding company, HBRIC. They relate to additional savings that officers are proposing. They relate to the council's opportunity to borrow, should it wish to. And then in the longer or the medium term, it's around strategic refresh, efficiency and effectiveness. I think for me and for the exec team, just reflecting on what we've heard from you through this process and what we've heard from submitters, item 17, it feels like there are a number of aims in there. Firstly, an aim to reduce the overall rate burden across the 3 years for communities. Secondly, to provide relief to the most affected people by the change in the footprint for public transport. Thirdly, to look to provide relief to those suffering hardship, whether they're suffering hardship as a result of being outliers in revenue and financing policy, whether it's the ongoing effects of the cyclone or a weather event that we don't know of that could occur in the near future. We've also heard Council's desire to provide an interim remission for councils on the utilities roll, but also to set Council up for the next 12 months in terms of strategic refresh, efficiency and effectiveness reviews, and I think a whole lot of potential consultations arising from work going on, be that LTP amendments, be that the future of rivers, be that coastal hazards, and changes to revenue and financing policy. So there's a deal of work ahead of us there. To try and address these aims, a bit of a straw man for you to have a think about. So if those aims are broadly in the right direction, I think you've got a number of levers you could potentially think about pulling around costs. And the first one of those you've covered in a bit of detail in the last 48 hours, and that was the ability to provide remissions for those people newly in the PT footprint, the ability to provide remissions for those people in a state of hardship. And officers have worked out what we think the total cost of those remissions might be. And then obviously that's an impact potentially on the general rate, and that looks at potentially about $1.2 million. Just touching on your budget decisions, and apologies if I haven't got these quite right. We wanted to come back and check with you, and we'll do as we go through the rest of this item. But you took some preliminary decisions on Tuesday around biodiversity and biosecurity. again, some thoughts back from exec that in terms of maintaining the pre-recovery momentum on biosecurity, adding $100,000 to year one essentially gets you back to pre-cyclone biosecurity levels. Adding $300,000 into year two will keep enough momentum in the biodiversity program that when it's restored to its full living and breathing self in year three, we won't have lost anything in terms of biodiversity. So just offer those up as potential cost issues. I have given some thought in the last 48 hours to the range and scale of what council is proposing to do in terms of reviews and consultations. LTP amendments, strategic refresh. We talked in workshops yesterday around things like coastal hazards, and it would be my recommendation to council that we need to put aside some potential one-off funding to deal with that bundle of work. And an early estimate of that is that will cost us around $250,000. So all of that feels like a whole bunch of added costs. What the item 17 then looks to do is to identify mechanisms that you could consider to reduce that back down. And there are, in item 17, a set of staff savings for you to consider, which deal with around $700,000 of savings, $750,000 in year one, 1.1 million in year two, focused on public transport, and $1.7 million in year three, again focused on public transport. Noting that there's a good deal of work that council wants to do in the next 6 to 9 months around what those year 2 and 3 numbers might eventually look like. Through the LTP process, councillors gave lots of attention to whether we should be involved in, or whether council should be involved in divesting assets, requesting a special dividend, or borrowing. Council had some principled discussions around the challenges that the council feels now, having borrowed to fund large-scale operating in the past. So in terms of advice here, my advice around a special dividend from HBRIC would be to look to focus it, if you wish to go there, on measures that will address those aims that are set out in the beginning in terms of reducing overall costs, but will have the minimum long-term effect on returns and are largely to deal with one-off recovery issues. So again, as a bit of a straw person, council could consider funding its remissions at $1.2 million as a one-off, and recognising that those are caused by both recovery and economic hardship, funding those from a special one-off dividend. And furthermore, you could look to cover potentially your preliminary decision around Hawke's Bay tourism. The difference between what you've got budgeted now and budgeted in as a result of your decisions is about $1 million. It's a one-off because you've only gone there for 1 year. You could consider funding that as well through either borrowing or a special dividend. I think the same holds true for your projected changes to biosecurity and biodiversity, agreeing that there's a final discussion around exactly what those numbers look like. But those are one-off in the sense that they are just getting us back to year 3, where we're back to the service levels and the funding that we currently have. So borrowing for those in the short term doesn't create a bow wave and a bump in year 3. If council chose to go down that route, you would end up essentially looking for a special dividend from HBRIC of, depending on where you might end up with numbers, around about $2.5 million in year 1 and around about $300,000 in in year 2. So those are levers that you could potentially pull. Equally, council could decide to simply borrow that money, but that would get you back into the same place potentially that we've been in the past. Again, just by way of illustration here, it's absolutely your decisions as to where you go. I thought it would be useful to give you some ballpark numbers of where pulling those sort of strings would end you up if you chose to do it through item 17. So I've asked Chris to work that straw person into his figures. And if you chose to pull levers roughly in that way, you would end up with a year 1 rates change down to 15.4%. You would end up at 18.4% in year 2. One of the challenges, of course, for council is that as you pull the rates down in year 1, the percentage in year 2 goes up, not necessarily the amount of money you're collecting, but the gap between year 1 and year 2 changes. And year 3, you end up at, I think, 8.5%. Overall, that would be a reduction in around about $6 million of costs that the ratepayer bears over the course of that 3 years, and a reduction down to about, for an overall increase over those 3 years of around 42% rather than close to 50 as it was previously. You would, in that kind of straw person, still be able to provide relief then to your PT boundaries, and you would be able to provide relief to those suffering hardship from those multiple sources, including changes to revenue and financing policies. And you would be able to cover off your interim decision of funding 50% of the council's costs on the utility rolls. Finally, I think it would also allow you and me as the CE to set ourselves up properly for a strategic refresh for efficiency reviews without essentially busting our operations in order to try and get that done, and also sets you up to be able to do your range of public consultations, whether that be coastal hazards, the results of the rivers review, or any changes that council may decide on to revenue and financing policies. I think we're likely and not unexpected, given a 3-year LTP, to have a fairly substantial LTP amendment in year 1 that will then drive changes to years 2 and 3. So there was a lot of information there, Chair, and again, really stress that I'm not trying to stand in the place of councillors here, but I thought it might be useful just to give you that as a bit of an outline of how councillors could choose to pull levers from item 17 as you go through the detail of it.
Yeah, thank you. That was very useful and captured the main issues that we dealt with on Tuesday. So, councillors, it's now time to ask questions within the paper, but more specifically to give comment and feedback on what Dr. Nick has provided for us. And ultimately, what we see on the screen with the average rate rise increase, our comfortability with that, and what levers that we do pull. Okay, so who would like to start us, please? Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you, Nick. That's really, really helpful. I just want to understand the potential timings around reviews and any output. And it's completely presumptuous to suggest there would be efficiencies that come out of it. And I think the right way to look at it is benchmarking, so that we have some confidence about how this council lines up to other equivalent councils. I think that's a very important first step. And then, irrespective of the outcome of that, it's still really good practice, and that is the clear commitment to look at some key pieces of core business and review those. But I'm just trying to get a sense of the timeline around that and at what point any changes may feed into this current LTP, please?
I would agree with you, councillor. The first move is benchmarking, and I actually have a conversation in 3 hours' time with a potential provider to do that benchmarking. I think we'll run through a series of reviews over the next 12 months. I'd really value the discussion with council as to the order of those, but it feels to me as though there are two first steps: benchmarking and the strategic refresh to understand where councillors' priorities sit. Already talked to Mr Maxwell, who is close to being underway with Section 17 review of that kind of catchment ICM bundle. Susie Young has been working through restructuring and slimming down and making more efficient our corporate support, and that was part of the savings we've already budgeted for this LTP. Katrina is preparing probably earlier in the new year to do some PT Section 17 work, because we need to do that anyway in advance of a new contract. And Chris and myself are still working through the detail of what some of the efficiency work might look like around particularly our kind of broader open spaces work. I'm not too keen to go into the IPMO work at this point because it's just too important to deliver. We then got those bunch of revenue and financing reviews, and I would really value a conversation with council about what order we do those in, because I'm not sure we'll get them all done before the annual plan, but the more I can get some additional help to do that, the quicker we can go. And clearly we've got coastal hazards and the role of council to consider in that piece as well. So there is a huge amount of work in all of that lot, plus what comes out of rivers. So I've got a broad plan, and I think it's a case of tying it down with council.
Can I just check? Would it be reasonable? Thanks, that's very, very helpful. Would it be reasonable to infer then that some of that work could feed through into that annual plan, so year two, others of it may be able to feed through into year three?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I actually have three questions. One's a pretty grunty one. I made the comment that I thought we were at or about peak rate, and that there was more opportunity in years 2 and 3 to give the organisation time to cut its cloth than there is in year 1. What would your reaction be, and to give you an opportunity to answer this, if we were to simply set a direction that, say, leaving aside the flood protection works under the NIWA agreements, or NIWI agreements, next year's rate increase was no more than 10%. And to set you the task of literally going away between now and next year and working out where that lands. Could you paint us a little picture of what that might mean for you in the organisation?
Absolutely, council can do that. That's your prerogative. My view of that is that you would be better to go through your strategic prioritisation and work out where you sit on that. Be cautious about percentages, because percentages are also, they measure the change between 1 year and the next year. They're not about the absolute amount of money that you levy to people. If I was in your position, I'd want to understand what the consequences of that would be. So, for example, should council take on coastal hazards? Clearly it's not going to meet those numbers for at least a section of the community. Part of the work that we're doing to help in your strategic refresh is to look at the financial position of the organisation and work out what parts of our ongoing rate increases are purely down to servicing debt, and then how much headroom has the organisation got for doing things the community might want it to do over the next few years. So I think it's potentially very worthy to identify to communities that you're looking to reduce your overall cost burden, but I would be cautious about setting an absolute figure. You either succeed or fail with it.
Yep, okay. The next question I've had, if you'll forgive me, Chair, is I have foreshadowed the possibility of this question. I don't know whether there's been a chance to work it out, but we had a group of submitters saying anyone who is getting a rates increase of more than 33% should be automatically eligible for a remission. And the Dr. Pearce and his co-submitters, I think, had worked out that wouldn't cost a lot if it was just addressing the 30 or so submitters in that area. Has there been a sense of what it would cost? Because I just want to make sure we've tested this. When I say cost, what the remissions budget that would be reallocated to other ratepayers would be if we were to cap.
Through our CFO, I think it was around $4.5 to $5 million.
Right.
At 33%, if we capped it at that level, which the submitter had asked about, it would be $4.4 million that would need to be remitted.
Right, thank you.
Of that, the total your utility rolls is 534,000 of that, so it's another 4 million of other.
That we need to find somehow or put onto other ratepayers. Finally, look, the remissions criteria have got me a little bit unclear. They're not spelled out here. Is it safe for us to be passing resolutions that there are going to be remissions? Bearing in mind that we set remissions through a revenue finance policy that was in a special consultative procedure, we have an understanding that anyone who's new to the public transport footprint paying more than $200 is going to get some sort of relief. We have an understanding that there is going to be a hardship criteria introduced for RFP change hardship related to absolute dollars and percentages and financial situation. Can we just sort of sign off and deliberate and bank that in our assumptions today, or do we need that wording in front of us? When would we get that wording in front of us? How do we approve that? What's the process?
I think you're absolutely safe to approve that. So you're approving at that policy level of,
right.
Yep, we want the remission to occur, and we want it to be based on people over a certain threshold, and we want it to be based on hardship for those other areas. We can then work through the detail of that and make sure that's ready before rate bills go out.
Right.
So I think you're perfectly safe, and I'll just check.
And we get to see that again before it goes?
We're happy to send it through. I would suggest trying to wordsmith it will get really hard.
No, I know, but we'd certainly get to see it.
An example of it. Yeah.
Every one of these people is going to have to enter a process.
Yep.
Have we got a sense of how we would resource the administration of these applications and how much discretion involved? Or is it going to be fairly automatic if you meet these criteria? Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
I'll start, and then either Susie or Desi will probably help me. But for PT, it's not a hardship thing, so it's going to be a number. For the hardship one, it's a case by case thing. So people have to have some level of. Otherwise, you just
evidence of hardship.
Undo your revenue and finance policy by default.
They would have to have some evidence for hardship.
I think Councillor Martin Williams asking is that the resolution that we have on today is sufficient enough for further detail to come back to us to approve before the rates bills go out.
That's it. And
That's what it is.
And that it's workable, it's not going to grind the organisation to a halt processing all these things.
We can come back to you on that.
Thank you.
But we've been told
then
that
back.
any remission has to be applied for by the ratepayer.
Yes.
Yes.
It's not as simple as what you're thinking, that you can just say
That's what I'm asking.
It's on
You
application.
have to apply.
You have to apply, but you can't say a blanket, anyone over 33% automatically they need to apply for it.
No.
Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Chair. Nick, the question I'm most commonly asked from a lot of people is, like saying they've asked it as a polite way of describing it. You guys, you've grown too much. Your staff numbers have gone through the roof. If it was me, I'd just have to cut my cloth and pull that back into line. And so in looking at that over the last 5 or 6 years, actually our staff numbers have gone up a lot. And if I've got that right, that was done for admirable reasons. Council wanted to undertake a step change in the way it did stuff. It wanted to really throw resource at the environmental patch, particularly in all those admirable objectives. I think some reasonable amount of borrowing was undertaken to do that, operational borrowing, and exacerbated by the subsequent COVID borrowing. So we've now got quite a bow wave that we're coping with. And so my question really relates around the increase in staff numbers, and I understand all the things that are coming up in terms of efficiency and effectiveness and so on. But I think actually a lot of that stuff is a really hard thing to do internally, because you're if I'm in charge of such and such a department, it's hard for me to say, actually we've got 8 people and we only need 5. Those are difficult things to say. And furthermore, the people that we're asking to make those decisions, it's not their patch, to be organisational, structural experts and that sort of thing. And what I'm getting around to saying is, if I look at the change that has occurred in staffing over that period, a more comfortable solution is to pull someone in whose job it is to know about this stuff, and ideally someone with good council expertise, who can go through the place and can say, at one hand, look, looks all good to me, guys, there could be some tweaking here, but looks all good. Or alternatively, actually you've gone from X to Y, which is a big jump in that period, and we feel you can do things in these areas to bring that back without significant effect on environmental outcomes and so on. So my comment is, actually that's a prudent thing to do, given what's happened in our increase in staff numbers, and given obvious feedback we're getting from ratepayers about rate increases and that sort of thing. And it's just a normal thing to say, actually we did throw a lot more resource at this a few years ago. Is that still appropriate in this climate? Because we've got all this other stuff that we never anticipated in terms of putting things right after the flood and so on. So.
Is there a specific question?
My comment was...
Make it a question.
Make it a question. What's the
do
question?
you think that, in addition to what is planned, in fact, we should be looking at the existing setup and asking the question, are the levels of staffing we got appropriate, or have we gone too far in terms of the step change that we wanted to bring about in environmental issues, and actually that's a bit overcooked in the context of what we've got coming up?
So I think there's quite a few things in there. I think there's a direct relationship between the programs that council wants to deliver and the number of people you need to do that. So that really starts with the benchmarking work that Councillor Harding talked about a few minutes ago, and it works then in parallel with what it is that council wants to focus on. We don't run an organisation that's got lots of staff sitting around doing nothing, for example. That just doesn't, those people just don't exist. So it's matching the staffing to the priorities of the organisation, what the organisation is trying to deliver. Absolutely, it's grown rapidly, and that reflected the work that council wanted to invest in. So really, I think it comes down to then 2 things. What is the work that council wants to continue to invest in? And that's your strategic refresh. And then are we doing those things as efficiently as we possibly can? We me and together with the exec team have looked to, I think we've now got 7 or 8% of the total workforce held as unfunded vacancies. So we've taken quite a substantial chunk of that move already. And through Ms Young, we've been working through a number of structural changes in our corporate support to make sure that that's as efficient as possible to make savings for this current LTP. So absolutely, we need to have the organisation right-sized to what it wants to deliver, and that's so we've taken those initial steps to save money, and there's probably more to do.
Could I ask one further question, Chair? Would you see value in pulling some outside person in to run the ruler over us, and doing that provides you with an independent, you and us with an independent view as to what these suggestions are?
I think beginning to stray into probably what's ultimately my domain, I will look to source advice on that. So, for example, the benchmarking work that will get done won't be done by us internally. We supply the data for that, and I'll get somebody to look at doing the benchmarking. Part of the reason we're suggesting some funding for the range of reviews is that they all cost money and they all require people to come and help us do it. So they're informed by the group managers and they're informed by me as the CE. They're generally done by somebody else. But I think independent is probably a bit of a misnomer because it's ultimately my gig as the CE to run it. But I'll certainly source external advice to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Rodley.
Thank you, Chair. Susie, question for you, please. I'm very comfortable with with treating these as one-offs and for that to bring the rate down. My question is around the most efficient and cost-effective way of doing that. So I just wanted to test with you that proposed to take the money as a dividend out of HBRIC, which we know has an ongoing tail of consequence. I understand we gain between 11, 14, 12% income from HBRIC on a growing trajectory if we stop taking the money out via the concept of compounding interest, and that we can borrow at 4% through our government capacity. Is taking the money out of HBRIC as a one-off dividend to cover these one-offs more financially beneficial than borrowing the money at 4%, in your view?
Good question. Thank you, Councillor Rodley. My view personally has always been that a rule of thumb is that you don't dip into the crown jewels to pay for your groceries type scenario, and you are factually accurate. The returns that we are expecting in the future of HBRIC are such that they will grow up to sort of 7, 8, 9, dependent on the investment type that we're looking at in totality. And factually accurate, the current cost of borrowing for us is just over 4%. So, it is probably cheaper for us to borrow. However, that does have some pain on the rates, and ultimately what you're trying to do at the moment is to bring down current pain of the rate burden. And so I understand why this is an option that we are looking at. However, everything has consequences. The way in which we've now set HBRIC up as an investment entity, there are multiple options available for them, such that they may look at lower returning investments anyway as part of that pot, just to offload those because it makes sense. So at the moment, we aren't instructing HBRIC as to what investment type to look at. There are now experts on that committee, on that board, that will make that decision on our behalf as to what they may choose to do and how to fund that.
So what I'm hearing is that this is going to be pain. We need to deal with it. There is pain involved. It's a case of pulling the plaster off quickly or pulling it off slowly. Mm-hmm. And we are trying to deal with the pain at the plaster point by reducing down to the 15.4. which we know then creates a tail going forward, and a lesser ability to pay because of our income will be reduced. So it has a very long tail, this action we might, that we're considering today. And Chris, do we have any idea if we borrowed the money, felt a bit of pain now, can we, but because we would then have an increasing income from not selling the crown jewels, what does that look like on our rates going across the 3 years? I really love that we're down to 15, I'd love it to be more, but if it was 17 and then we were seeing a trajectory down, I could also be comfortable with that. I just want to explore if that is a fallacy or if it's actually a reality.
Can you just repeat your question? Sorry, your actual, sorry, Di, and I realised,
What does it look like? So if we borrowed the money out of the government coffers at 4% and spread, so by in effect spreading the cost of meeting these one-offs over a longer period, but with the anticipation that leaving HBRIC intact creates an increasing volume of income, what does that look like on our rates?
At a rough thing, borrowing $3 million, repaying it over 10 years with a 4 or 5% interest rate, you're probably looking at somewhere around 450,000 in repayments and interest each year, so that's just under 1% in rates.
1%. So if we did that, so we don't touch the cash cow, we would be looking at about
A 1% increase in rates next year, and that would have to be held for 10 years.
And what would the rates this year look like?
They would be the same as what's sitting there.
Yeah.
Right, because the pay would be going forward. So that is going to collide directly with the drawdown of cash to do the infrastructure builds. We're going to have a clashing point, aren't we?
Through you, Chair,
Compounding.
HBRIC would not necessarily have to sell.
Oh, we wouldn't be selling.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean though, but we would be asking them not to invest. Yeah. Which
Well,
is the
they
same
need- They
effect.
needn't divest either. It'll be their decision as to how they dealt with that
Yeah.
dividend.
But there will be an impact.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make some comments about HBRIC after into comments, but public transport's what's been troubling me the last couple of days. I'm interested to throw a big curveball and ask the Chief Executive if we were of a mind to consider the public transport change that's been discussed as quite critical. If councillors were to consider that important, what would, of this up to 5 million that HBRIC has suggested is possible for us to take as this one-off dividend, what would $1 million out of that HBRIC dividend into public transport over the next couple of years look like in terms of progressing the strategy there or the change and shape of public transport?
I'll hand to Ms Brunton, and I just clarify, that would be on top of the remission type process. Yep.
Correct, yes, separate from.
Through you, Chair. An admirable notion, because ultimately the more money that we have in public transport, the more that we can do. You'll remember that the funding arrangements with Waka Kotahi currently are, they give us 51%, we contribute 49%. That's in averages, but that's for public transport and buses. If we were to increase funding from our end, that would change that split, but contracts run for 9 years, so we would need that consistently over the 9 years, not just as a one-off. I think my advice is to leave it where it is, and then let us work out what a service, the best service can be with the money that we have. And then in 2 years' time, then at central government election time again, we have a new government position statement. we have a new incoming government with different priorities, might be the same government, it might not be, and we do this all over again. I think that's the time that this organisation would be best placed to reconsider a step change in public transport then.
Thank you,
Can I just
Katrina.
finish with a clarification?
Of course.
So that would mean that the services that we've got now, that we know we're not really delivering what we would hope to deliver, will be the same for the next 2 years. Is that the?
Through you, Chair, essentially that is correct. We will do our utmost, one, to deliver the current service, and if we can, try to look for opportunities to improve that within the budget envelope.
Thank you. Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, councillor Sears.
My pleasure, councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question in regard to the submitters around requesting financial assistance, but I was distracted by the excellent question from Councillor McIntosh, and would say that it is the burning question, and good on them for asking it, possibly $1 late and $1 short, or a day late, $1 short, things are saying, in terms of it's something we ought to have looked at. The executive team looked at 6 months ago, and we asked that question 6 months ago, to have tabled the options arising when you examine services and consider them, their effectiveness, and I don't know if we've correctly done that. Turning to my question, I'm really concerned that, and I don't quite understand where we landed with the respective requests from Biodiversity Hawke's Bay and the Future Farming Trust as to their security and tenure. Can we just have some clarity? For example, I'm not sure whether year one of the Biodiversity Hawke's Bay funding stream is secure. Can we have some clarity on that?
So just to clarify, the request, as I recall, was for year 2 and 3. So they did not ask for anything year 1.
But can we have a little background as to what they are doing in year 1 and where they've derived income to keep them going in year 1?
Okay, well, we could have Ian help answer both those questions in terms of Future Farming Trust and Biodiversity Hawke's Bay.
Through you, Chair, look, I don't know how they're deriving their income for year 1, other than they haven't asked for it, which would say to me that there is not an issue for them to keep the lights on, so to speak. We are maintaining the contribution to their the $50,000 which they will allocate to those community grant programs. That's baked into the budget, so that's there.
That's probably where I'm coming from.
So that's in the budget.
In year 1,
correct.
They will be I know that's a contestable fund.
Yep. So it's a contestable fund that they manage. So we pass the money to them. They then manage a contestable community funding program. So people come to them and ask for funding for projects. They then allocate that funding we've given them to those projects. They
can't access the funds themselves.
It's not to keep the lights on, it's for community-based projects, but they haven't asked for money in year 1 to keep the lights on. They've got it, so that to me would say they've got money to do that. What they're saying is that come year 2, they don't, and they need support for that. And that's the piece of work that we will be doing in partnership with Department of Conservation over the coming months in advance of the annual plan process that you'll be considering this time next year, to secure funding for them and bring options back for you to consider to fund them to keep the lights on. That's the undertaking we've given.
And on Future Farming Trust, the question is?
The similar line of questioning really is, these are entities we want to keep the lights on, and what is our role in doing that?
And look, in the Future Farming Trust, they effectively have asked for the $20,000 of an admin and overhead cost, and we haven't had any engagement with them prior to that request to understand what it is and why they need it and how it's going to work. and what their long-term proposals are or propositions are for funding. That's the conversation that we will engage in now to work that out. So I can't tell you what they need from us in the short or long term because we haven't had those conversations. And we would obviously circle back to the 2018 process council ran to establish it and give you that advice to say, well, this is what you said in setting it up, this is what you told them, this is what they're asking for now, how would you like to proceed? But we haven't had those conversations.
Thank you. Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, okay. I'll start with a question, go comments that will turn into questions. Just first off, so that may give you a little bit of time, is what was the total value that we actually, changing from land value to capital value, what is the total value that we actually are now not rating? So we've got ratepayers who get a reduction in their rates. Have we got a value on that? Do we know what that total envelope looks like? So we changed from land value to capital value.
Yep.
And so capital value now is paying a higher level of rates. There are those who were initially rated on their land value, and because they've got very little capital value, now they actually get a reduction in their rates. And I've seen the graphs, but I haven't never seen the total. Have we got the total there?
No, I'm not sure if staff prepared those values for this discussion.
Through you, Chair, I don't think so. The total amount of rates collected doesn't change.
No, but what? No, I'm not asking that.
No.
I'm asking what is the amount of reductions that are being given, going to be given, if we adopt this plan?
Have it.
They already have. Those changes have already been made.
I think
I know they've been made.
I don't think we have the answer to that.
So we've never looked into what that total figure is.
Is it a long term?
Chair, I might be able to help. Actually, I just so happen to have a spreadsheet that Vanessa, our expert, kindly emailed to us on the 12th, and not usually this sufficient, the 12th of January 2024, which was a summary table of exactly that information. So we have had it. I mean, it's still, I'm not downgrading your questioning or your interest. I'm just saying we actually have received that information.
Okay, so is
what
there
is
a
that
question, whatever that figure is,
Oh, that's a
what is the question?
I'm asking the question how much that is.
Chris doesn't have it with him right now. But are you able to shed some light on that?
Land value total for the region, 43 billion, capital value nearly 76 billion. Does that help?
No, that's not the question I'm asking. So if you add up all the reductions that people are going to get in their rates bill coming September, whenever it is, what will that be?
We just don't have that information with us.
Okay. So we don't know the impact of the change from land value to capital value. Apart from that, it's neutral. So some are paying a lot more. And we talked about, I've talked about the PIN that this actually, by having a rate increase and a change from land value to capital value, the averages look really nice if you look at the document, consultation document, but there are some steep cliffs on either side. So the averages look really good, but I would like to know, so people are being given a relief of rates. What's the value of that? If that's 4.5 mil, then all of a sudden I'm thinking here, we've actually given a whole lot of money back to, in theory, in rates relief to our ratepayers. And honestly, I haven't been given the answer why we did that. Why were they so deserving? I don't begrudge those people, those ratepayers getting a reduction, but I still haven't heard a good reason why that is. And I can go through quite a few reasons why I believe that actually is wrong. And you've heard me talk about this before, and I'll continue to bring it to the table. And Councillor Foley was Councillor Gravel. I'm Councillor Land Value versus Capital Value. You've heard me say this before, and I'll keep this up because it's so not right. And nobody's given me a reason why we've given a rates relief to these people. Why are they so deserving? But first, let's ask the question: how much is it? How much is actually are we giving in reduction? And you can see I'm getting a bit animated.
Desiree has a table.
Yes, so in agenda item 17, in number 14, there is a bell curve which shows the distribution of the rates increases. I think that might be what-
Item,
17. So that last paper, in paragraph 14, we show a distribution curve of where the rates fall. Now, it's also attached in Stella as for improved readability.
yes.
But what that does show is the combined effect of the revenue and financing policy change and the long-term plan budget increases, and all the changes that we've made to the revenue and financing policy, not just the change from land value to CV. So it's the change in footprints, the scheme reviews,
Yep.
everything.
But we don't have a specific one due to the change from land value to capital value.
We did during the revenue and financing policy review.
Well, could we maybe during the course of now or in the future, get that figure? Because to me, that's actually a very important figure. Because nobody wants to pay more rates. I get that, okay? And when we actually meet with farmers, we're supposedly lately amongst friends because we're actually giving them a reduction in those who are paying land value. I shouldn't say farmers, those who actually are now rated on capital value, not their land value, and they've got mainly land value in their property portfolio. So we're amongst friends, and even they are saying, you know, good on you, that's fantastic. They're actually saying this organisation needs to cut its cloth, needs to get to core business. So they're not saying, hooray, thank you for the rates relief, and that was well overdue. None of them are saying that, you know. They actually putting the focus somewhere else.
So what I've heard here is you'd like that information.
Yep.
And actually a really good time is when as we've resolved, looked at the passenger transport and Upper Tukituki, and that can be part of it, that piece of information, or even before we get to those reviews of the revenue and finance policy.
Well,
So, because we can't answer that today, but you have a further question.
Yes, a question to the CE. Would it be helpful, and it's in line with what Councillor McIntosh asked, and it's really bowled over Councillor Curtin, which is quite amazing actually, that would it be helpful if we as governors, as a council, would give you direction of what we think is absolute core business that we want you to focus on? Will that assist you?
Absolutely, and I think that's the conversation we've been having for several months now, and that's the strategic refresh we've got coming. Council needs to be really clear what it wants to focus on, because I can match the ability of the organisation to deliver it to what council wants to do.
Because I agree with you that setting a percentage is just fallacy. We really need to do what should we do? And because that's what the ratepayer wants us to do. The ratepayer's not interested in a 10 or 33 or a 100 or 200% increases. We're actually here to do a job, and that's what we should be doing.
Absolutely, and I agree through our strategic sessions that we had before we set upon the LTP workshops. That's exactly what we attempted to do. But we've got a refresh coming up with what has changed as the organisational review, a part of that refresh. Councillor Harding.
Oh, kia ora, Chair. I was just diverted on that. I'm going to send Councillor Van Beek. I appreciate his line of questioning. I'm going to send him a table which may give him further ammunition, because we actually have, on a sector basis, received a lot of information from staff back in January on the impact of LV to CV on general rate. So I wouldn't say that we didn't understand the impact on average, but averages disguise outliers. Averages are valuable, Councillor says, but they also don't show the range, and I'm happy to concede that point to you. So I've got to remember my question now, and it was a good one too. Look,
I'm sure it was.
this was not my question, but it was.
I think it's a great question.
Move on.
No. It's around, and I think it's a question for Ian, around the sacrifices that are being suggested in the table at 38. Sponsorship contributions, 65,000. Now, I appreciate the offer, but I'm just wondering whether this is the smartest cut that we can make when I appreciate the amount of the leverage that these sponsorships create, the amount of community energy and power towards the goals of this organisation that are created by whether it's the Balanced Farm Environmental Awards or the Hawke's Bay Primary Sector Awards, these things, there's a massive leverage built into these programs, and it would be counterproductive to us to undermine the effectiveness of those. So I just wonder, for $65,000, that's a cut that I would prefer not to make, but perhaps, Ian, you could comment.
Look, I think you accurately described the predicament. This has been offered up because it's an area where we can identify some discrete funding and decide what to do with it. I personally haven't put it up because I think it's necessarily the right thing to do, but these are considerations of yours to make. I fully accept and fully agree with you the tail that it would have in suddenly and unexpectedly walking away from these groups, because we haven't talked to any of them about this, and the impact that will have on our relationships, our credibility in these communities. It would be tough, but these are the calls for you to make. So they're there. I agree with your sentiment around them, but you have to decide what you want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will Foley, councillor. Thank you. Question from you.
Yeah, just wanted to get onto gravel. Just joking. Hey, I'd like to make a few comments, if I could, first just quickly on what we've heard so far. I'll just run through them. So one of the first questions was on benchmarking. Sure, that's a good thing to do, but we need to be assured of what's best for us, what's best for Hawke's Bay and our ratepayers. And so the good example is what Councillor Van Beek was just talking about. We decided to change from land value to capital value, and some of the information put up to us was we were only one of two councils left a rating on land value, and so that was, part of a good reason to change. Yet, as it's turned out, was it the right reason to make for Hawke's Bay at this exact time with everything else going on? And I'd argue perhaps it wasn't. There was a question about setting a plus 10% rate rise. I'd argue, what about setting a negative 20% rate decrease? Because if we continue to keep setting rate rises above the rate of inflation, it's simply unsustainable. And so yesterday, the current account deficit came out, over $27 billion. The country's spending more than it's earning. It's just not sustainable. Just like a few of those comments Councillor McIntosh is making, particularly around some independent views around this, because with Councillor Kernan was talking about the previous 6 months, tasking staff with trying to get to this point, and we've got to where we've got to, but I think an independent view would certainly add and help us get to perhaps where we all want to end up a lot better than where we've got to right now. My first question is going to be as a result of Councillor Rodley's questioning. She was sort of questioning around the difference between drawing the dividend versus borrowing. When we looked to the start of this process, some of the things we set out to do is we wanted to cut costs, we wanted to stop borrowing for operation. So if we started looking, and we've added back on costs 2 days ago, plus we're talking about now, okay, maybe we don't draw a dividend, maybe we borrow. Are we simply not going right back to where we started this whole process? Can anyone answer that question?
Through you, Chair. Yes, you are to a certain extent. What I think we've looked to do is to provide you advice, which you've asked for, on reducing the rate impact given the current times. And we've looked to, rather than just straight go to borrowing, to ask our holding company to fund things that are one-off and won't create the same sort of bow wave. Absolutely, it means that down the line, then potentially it impacts their ability to provide the same level of return, and they've given you advice on that, or given me advice, which I've attached to the item in a letter. There is no free money out there, so however you choose to pull the levers, but I think we've tried to find a way of doing it that is, or suggest ways of doing it that are relatively balanced and not funding large-scale operating from either borrowing or a dividend.
Nick, can you just comment on the thinking of process from now on with the organisational reviews, how councillors will be involved in setting the scope and expectations within that process?
So I'm happy to share the detail of what's being planned with council to make sure the areas that we're working on are consistent with what council is looking at. But ultimately, organisational reviews are my domain, and so council can't run those in the same way. But absolutely keen to keep the dialogue going as to how we do that. The strategic process in terms of what council wants to focus on is absolutely a conversation for governors.
Mm-hmm. And Susie, just your professional advice on Councillor Foley's thoughts around keeping rate rises in line with inflation values as we move forward, and how possible or impossible is that for an organisation such as local government?
Well, I think the current situation we're in now is proving that it is extremely difficult to maintain no rate rises, essentially, outside of inflation. Around the country, you've seen all councils rate rises between, or up to 25% in some instances. So extremely difficult even maintaining rates just at inflation. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley.
Sorry,
Foley.
I hadn't really started my list of questions, but my point around that was it's whether we can or can't keep them to the rate of inflation, it's not sustainable to rate above the rate of inflation year after year after year. And so we're getting that feedback from our ratepayers now. So just, if I could just start my questions, please. Just following on from that, in the table 40, that graph went out in our consultation document, and look, I always believed and part of the rate increases, the 4.5 million deferred rate increases, that was actually repaying debt, but as it explains in the point 41, it's actually just stopping the continuation of the borrowing. Is that correct? Because I feel a bit silly. I sort of read and saw that wrong from the start of this process to now.
Yeah, so through you, Chair. In 23-24, we are borrowing around $7.9 million to offset instead of rating on the general rate, and that was following from the 2021 LTP. In 24-25, we reduce that amount down to 3.4 million, so we reduce it by 4.5, so we're borrowing less at that time. And then in year 2, we don't borrow the remaining 3.4 million. Then in year 3, we start paying back all of those loans that we have borrowed.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That clears that up. Another line of questioning asked was around the remissions, and I don't think we got a response from staff. It feels like, we have created quite a mess here, and the remissions is going to continue to be a mess. how much, I guess, time, resource, and a mess is that going to be ongoing for staff to deal with all of that? It's yeah, it feels like it obviously wouldn't have been budgeted at the start of this LTP, but it's very much a live issue now.
So Susie, you're best placed, and just to remind us, remissions are just for the first year, so only impacting year one.
Yeah, can I give you, through you, Chair, just a comparative, Councillor Foley, of actually the time that it took this year to process the natural calamity, the remissions on hardship. We've received and processed just over 300, or just over 300, under 350 applications. That's been going now for 10 months as we process those, so it is a long process of individually looking and assessing each application with the applicant. We initially took on about 5 resources. We had some casuals in there for a short term. They've now left the organisation, and that continuation of processing has fallen onto the current rates team, who continue to process that. What we are looking at the moment is 3 times that. In terms of that outcome, in terms of that figure that we're talking about, potential. So it will be administratively burdensome, but we will work through that with the current rates team. If that is the decision that we make, we may need some short-term casual staff to help for a short period of time, because it is manual.
Mm-hmm. And the calamity remission you're talking about is from recovery?
Yeah, the natural calamity. Well, it could be any natural event, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just last question, please, Chair. In table or paragraph 38, the table of cost savings, the sponsorships, is the accurate figure the 65,000 in year one, or the sum of all the figures and consequences, because they don't quite line up?
Through you, Chair, 65 is correct. The 40 is made up of 20, 10 and 10. There's the 20, and the comms budget refers to the 5K for the Hawke Field Days. So, sorry, there's a couple of semicolons or commas or something missing in there, but it is 60.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, that makes more sense. Thanks now, Nick. And just in the, well, basically just part of that and biosecurity. So the ICM total budget's 27 million going up to about 20.6 year 2 and 3. So is the 185, that 40 of sponsorship, is that simply all we could come up with out of the 27 million?
No, through you, Chair, there had been, what's not shown on this table is costs cut out of the ICM budgets prior to landing on this. This is additional to the savings that have already been offered up as part of the development of the long-term plan. I don't have those figures off the top of my head, but it's several $1 million from my recollection.
That's before or after the $27 million in the funding impact statement and the documents that went out with the consultation?
You want to clarify that?
Not sure. I think it's probably before, but.
So you've got stuff taken out?
Correct.
Which did the consultation and now the.
Correct, yeah.
Can you clarify that, sorry?
So the consultation document that went out had cost savings already for ICM within that.
Yes.
What you're seeing on item 17 is an additional cost saving that will go on top,
Okay.
of what went out in the consultation.
That clarify for you, Councillor Foley?
Well, clarifies it, but my question was, yeah, so the 27 million budget is correct. And yeah, so I was saying it is the 40,000 sponsorships and the 185 simply, as much as we could extract out of that 27 million.
I've already had 3 million taken off it, Councillor.
Yeah.
So there's a larger picture there, Councillor, which is prior savings that have been put into the budgets before this. This is additional to those, and I don't have the total figure off the top of my head, but it's several $1 million.
I get that, but just in response to the comment from the other councillor, the 27 million budget was what went out in consultation, and I'm just reacting to the submissions and the feedback we got from our ratepayers, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Councillor Roadley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ready to move if we're ready for that. You got further questions?
Just a quick clarification question.
Just any last clarification or questions before councillor Rowley would like to move? Thank you.
Looking at the chart there, Nick, you've put $1 million into special dividend economic development. Did you, I can't see there, you talked about a fund for rates. Did you talk about a fund for rates remission?
Yeah.
Where am I seeing that there, please?
I'll ask Mr. Kaima to take you through that. Just
Yeah, it's just moving. There we go. And it was 1.2.
1.2.
1.2 for rates remission.
Test impact 1.2 rates. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kernan, a question or clarification?
I'll pass.
Pass, okay. Councillor Rodley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to move the recommendations as put forward to staff, being recommendation 1, 2, 3.1, 3.2.
Yes.
And 4 with some details to follow.
All with some details to follow. So not 3.3 and not 3.4.
No, I don't approve either of 3.1 or 3.4.
3.3, 3.4, okay. You're not in. Okay. So you'd like to keep the sponsorships and contributions, and you'd like to keep the pest management bait subsidies?
Yes, Chair.
Would you like to see how that may impact?
Would.
Okay. Chris, can you please make those adjustments? If you can.
Yep.
Done. So year 1 is 16. Year 2 is 18.3. Year 3 is 8.5. Presuming what we decide with the special dividend, of course.
Correct.
Okay. Can you please?
Do you want to go through
Yes.
what those might
Can
be?
we-
Yes.
Can we go through 4, please? So we.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So the 1 million to prop up Hawke's Bay tourism for 1 year only. The 1 million, or 1.2 million for the remissions, to cover the one-off remissions. Full. And just check me here, Dr. Nick, was it 250,000 for the review, one-off costs for to undertake those reviews?
Correct.
Yes. And what also was suggested with biodiversity and biosecurity?
Yes, that we approved on Tuesday.
400 in total. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well,
Well,
isn't it
it's-
800 over the 3 years?
No,
The model through you, Chair, the model I
Yes.
put up this morning was 100 to maintain your biosecurity, because that gives
And
you
the
back, and then
300.
300 in year 2.
Yeah.
And then by year 3, everything's back up to running.
So that's 400 total.
That's the top-ups on the pieces that were already budgeted for.
Correct. Madam Chair.
Yes, I'm just clarifying this.
That's 2.0.
And, all right. And I need a seconder, unless we need clarification
Just a
on the board.
Point of clarification,
Yep.
Madam Chair. It seems as though this recommendation resolution is premised on receiving an extra dividend.
Yes,
So is that something we should?
That is number 4.
that is number 4 that councillor Rodley just outlined.
Agrees to request a special dividend of, and we're just working out the exact amount of those combined totals, which I think is it 2.
So we've had 1 for economic development, which is for Hawke's Bay Tourism,
1.2 for the
1.2 for the remission support.
400 for biodiversity, and the 250 for the reviews.
Yes.
I wonder, Madam Chair, whether we, in fact, given that's so pivotal to the decision-making, that we deliberate on that on its own and to clarify that in advance of the subsequent resolutions.
I'm comfortable with that if we can see the impact first, though, Neil.
Okay.
Yeah. We do have to
think we-
take,
we
I think the
definitely will
dividend
take-
really is the crucial point in which we can make basis decisions.
Can I say
Okay.
a point of clarification too,
Yes.
Chair? So we've signalled through various internal reviews that, I think we're signalling that we expect year 2 in particular we expect to do better than that.
Yes.
And I would like to see the intent of that reflected in what we're deciding now.
We can't, because we have an annual plan process to go through. An LTP amendment is a part of that, because we know that coastal hazards is a possibility. We know that the organisational review possibly changes that year 2 number.
Chair,
Yes.
there was something that's been in the back of my mind we've done a whole series of subject to resolutions
we have.
over the course of the last
Yes, we have.
day or so.
Principally, yes.
I was wanting to add to the item 10 resolutions on the integrated catchment management, biodiversity and erosion control, a specific direction that we initiate effectiveness reviews on both of those dimensions. There is no resolution on the table that we initiate effectiveness reviews around integrated catchment management addressing both erosion control and biodiversity, biosecurity. So I was wanting to add that into this mix at some stage. It's implicit, but I think it's actually a really important lever that we can strategically pull alongside the year 2 rate increase figure that we see there to signal to our community that we're not happy with that, and we're going to be doing everything we can to ensure a more effective approach for ratepayer spend. So I was just really wanting to build that into the resolution.
I understand your signalling. What I don't want us to get into, and I agree with you, what I don't want us to do is go through every program right now on what efficiency and effectiveness review.
It would be no more than this is approved on the understanding that we are going to initiate Section 17A effectiveness reviews across integrated catchment management in the forthcoming year.
Okay, just quick reply and advice on to achieve that, best way to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, council can do that. I think you run the risk of trying to decide on all your reviews now. I wouldn't add Section 17 because
Okay,
Section 17.
just say effectiveness reviews.
I would just have I think there's a resolution.
There's a resolution from our run sheet.
On our run sheet that might cover what you're there.
Yeah, can you bring up the recommendations? Thanks, Dizzy. Okay, so Councillor Williams, are you happy that we just leave it more broadly? Can we hold that?
Okay, well, let's carry on for now.
Yep. But you have
this
signalled it.
I'm wanting this formally on the record somewhere.
Yes, okay. Can we please go back to, I think we need to go back to number 4 and the suggestion that Councillor Curtin had around approving the dividend amount and the purpose for the dividend, which we all agree is one-off. And so do we have those figures that we've just spoken about up on the screen for dividend? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Right, so let's move through agreeing to 4 if we please can. So Councillor Roadley, you've moved. Now we need a seconder for 4, please.
It's just the special dividends. Happy.
Yep, special dividends. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roadley.
Could you share screen?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Chris, what?
Cool.
Oh, I was trying to share mine, but.
Okay, Charlie, would you like the spreadsheet screen up? Yes, is it, can you see it? Yep, thank you. Kia ora Thompson. We're just working through resolution 4. Yep, thank you. Councillor Roadley, would you like to speak to resolution 4?
Yes, I would. This decision goes against every inch of my being. I absolutely hate it. However, we have been told repeatedly by our community, it has been raining, you need to dip into the war chest for this. I absolutely have confidence that whilst this will have a long tail, it is not catastrophic. We are not selling or asking HBRIC to sell the fatted calf, as it might be, sell the family silver. We are asking them to use their expertise to leverage for this one-off singular item to give some relief to our community who are suffering the compounding impacts of the cost of living crisis, the recovery costs, everything that's coming at them. And this is, by way, in my view, a pragmatic solution to bring that relief to our community. I just would like to also note that whilst they, actually, no, I'll come back to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, a couple of, like my colleague, I'd like a couple of scene-setting comments around this. It's never good to spend long-term money on short-term goals, but these are exceptional circumstances. We do need to deliver a credible, acceptable, reasonable, not sure it'll be reasonable, rates increase. We need to see this in the context, though. The context, I mean, and the question is, should we maintain their increases within the cost of living adjustment? Well, I just wanted to point out, if you look at the waterfall graph on page 11, a simpler interpretation of that, and the best interpretation of that, is we were already starting 20% ahead based on previous decisions of previous councils for good reasons at the time. And it's simply through the deferred rates increases and reduced investment and readjusting the investment expectations that have been baked into previous LTPs. That was 20.2% increase. So the organisation is actually doing pretty damn well in the context of everything we're dealing with to get back from 22% that was already baked in to 16 now. So that's the real context of what we're doing here. Also, just want to say, in respect of those people who feel that this is the rainy day and that we should be using all of the silver to solve our problems. Well, actually, this LTP is about setting us up to build that big capital program. 47 million, and there's a very light touch in terms of the financial impact of that in this 3-year LTP, because we have chosen to 20-year loan fund that, and the majority of that work only starts to hit our balance sheet in year 2 and beyond. We have not. That means, in practice, in fact, it is still open from a longer-term point of view to fund those things differently. So it is still open to future decisions. In fact, to say, and I'm not presaging that this is the likely outcome, but future councils could actually reorganise our investments. They could decide to take $47 million out of our managed funds and pay all that off. But we've chosen that the best view is it's an these are $47 million, or $250 million of intergenerational assets that we're building, and we're going to loan fund them. That's all I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Any further speakers? Councillor Curtin.
Anyone else?
No, you put your hand out.
Well, look, Madam Chair, this prospect to use 282.85 million of funds, long-term funds, strategic funds, is probably alongside the decision made 3 years ago. It's almost deja vu around this table, where yourself, Madam Chair, and Councillor Williams and myself opposed a zero increase. I find it ironic that we're now 3 years down the track, then wanting to, if you like, increase the rate, but this time wanting to reduce it. So I find that an ironic situation. The reality is that the effects of this are to reduce the equity of the council and the ratepayer. And I go to the letter from HBRIC. The next 10 years, the order will be something like, it'll take 14 years to recover from spending this money now. what the effect is really is that those funds go to pay the groceries. It's clear that we haven't turned our mind to reducing as we should have, making the service adjustments we should have. We make the same mistake that we did in 2021. It's a fundamental error to mask, if you like, decisions that we weren't prepared to take this time round. I can't support this. It goes against everything that I would expect of council in terms of prudent management. It compromises the investment strategy that we set only 6 months ago. It, in my view, is doing the ratepayer no service whatsoever to kick for touch and not deal with the real issues and burden future generations with our decision-making today. I can't support this resolution, Madam Chair.
Any other speakers? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my default is I think Councillor Curtin has foreshadowed and Councillor Rodley herself in putting this motion that this is against the better sensibilities, really. I would say, though, that the advice we've got is that we will lose, in effect, the equivalent of what we're taking as a special dividend over the period that you've referred to, namely $2.8 million. And I think that hit to what could be called our balance sheet pales into comparison to the almost monthly fluctuations of the value of our port shares, which would have decreased substantially more than $2.8 million since the IPO, and have every chance of recovering spectacularly above that over the term of that 14 years. And I'm truly hoping that if we're looking through the Quayside model to turn 500 million into 2 billion, this $2.8 million is again, in that context, going to be seen as small beer. On the flip side of that, we were told in 2020 COVID was extraordinary and this is the worst the world was ever going to get. Well, guess what? It ain't, and this isn't the worst it's going to get. I'm very, very conscious of that. That's why I shared at the opening, this is not the rainy day. But equally, we've had to navigate some absolutely extraordinary challenges as an organisation, which I don't think any council's really had to deal with in my lifetime. But then I'm only 57. So, you know, they are saying to us, we can't handle it. We have pressed on ahead with a revenue and finance policy change, which was brave and courageous, and I believe the right decision. I don't want to relitigate that now, unlike some of my colleagues. And this is a way to help us transition to the impact of that through remissions and funding reviews to address some of the anomalies that are poked out of the sides of that. I don't think it's a pin. If you look at the graph, it's actually a very wide stool, and it's got edges. So this helps with some of that. It provides relief in truly extraordinary circumstances without a bow wave in context, and so I reluctantly support it. And the general consensus at the moment seems to be survive until 25, and that's what this will help us do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foley.
Yeah. Apologies, Chair. This is just, I just had to duck away for a minute. This is just recommendation 4.
It is.
And the amount of 2 point something million applied to.
As a special one-off HBRIC dividend.
Applied to anything specific?
Oh, sorry, applied to 1 million for economic development, namely tourism for year 1. 1.2 million for the remission support, 250,000 for the various reviews the organisation has to undertake within the next year or two, and 400,000 for biodiversity and biosecurity to bring us up to the levels pre-cyclone.
just really struggling. Like there was a lot of calls during consultation period for selling down some investments, and I get why they said that. I don't know if this was the reason they wanted to do that. I feel like this is probably no better than decisions made in 2021, and I get that that's an excuse as to, you know, why we find ourselves where we are now, but we haven't actually addressed, yes, we need to stop borrowing and we need to start paying back that debt, but we haven't really addressed why we were borrowing in the first place, the large increase, and trying to address the cost. So I don't agree with selling investments for this purpose, but then I don't agree with the rate rise either. So I'm really stuck on this.
Yeah. Clarify we're not selling investments.
You'll have to wait till we get to the vote.
Can we just clarify that the motion isn't to sell investments, it's to request an additional dividend?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, same thing, yep.
It's not the same thing.
Not the same thing.
Not exactly. So we've sought advice from HBRIC on the capacity for a dividend, and obviously through their letter they've provided some advice back to us. Okay, any other speakers? Councillor Van Beek.
Okay, I'm not supporting this, and I'm actually appalled that somebody dares to say that actually this wasn't a rainy day. It should have been at 8:30 at my place on the 13th of Feb. We had to run, we had to race out of our property, not to be swept away by the river. And I'm an eyewitness. Still live in a garage. This morning I had to use still my portable loo. And this hasn't been a rainy day. For us to put this out further is a luxury idea. That we're actually going to look after those in the future and not look after those who we're dealing with now, okay? I just got the information from Zan. We actually are reducing rates to a certain sector ratepayers, 2.354 mil. They're getting a reduction. And I don't begrudge them that. But I still haven't heard a good reason why we should do that. Not one good reason. And I can just give one example. When I open up my information that my bank sends me to, I'm just speaking right now. When I open my information that my bank sends me about the trends that are happening in the primary sector, the third graph they always talk about is fertiliser. I'll just give it as one example. When I open up information about my own industry, we never talk about fertiliser because we don't use the darn stuff. The way farmers use fertiliser is to make more money. What does fertiliser do to our environment? Just rest my case. There's a whole lot of other things that I can go to. So I believe the most risk-free thing that we can do with money that we've got right now during this rainy day, and this is a truly rainy day, is to pay back debt. Because that will relieve us from long-term rate rises. And by borrowing cheap from the Crown, gives us this la-la land idea that we reduce our rates. As we found out during the COVID period, when we decided to borrow instead of rate, we're now paying for it. And so will our ratepayers going forward continue to pay for it. So I can't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Van Beek. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor McIntosh.
We're all uncomfortable about the HBRIC release of money for the reasons that have been well articulated. For me, we've made some quite significant changes in the way we run that place, and they're going to deliver us benefit. Actually, I would argue there's a lot more benefit still to be had by further changes we can make in that area. to give some context to it, a quick calculation from me is that if Agebrick is returning what an average super fund that's prudently invested should return, $2.8 million equals about 3 weeks of income from the portfolio. So for me, it's not a palatable thing to do, but in the context of everything that happened and in the context of that 3-week example, it's a reasonable thing to do. The other thing I do, actually, well, no, that's all I want to say about Agebrick. I do want to note that I do want to tie our colours to what flag to the mast, or whatever you call it, in respect of the 18.3% in year 2. We'll chat about that a bit later, but those are my comments on Agebrick.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sears.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The difficulty in this sort of one-off business, or looking at it in this way, is you sort of get to the position of, I can't support selling up assets, taking a dividend to pay for operations. But I think I'm clear. We have approved things here today: Hawke's Bay Tourism, a rates relief fund, biodiversity. We've agreed to spend $2.8 million more than we budgeted for. So it seems to me my choice is to go back to the community and say the increase is now 22%. I think that 23%.
It was 23, yeah.
Or it's 16% because we are using some of your funds to pay for decisions that we've made. I've got that right, haven't I? I can vote for using Agebrick, or I can vote against it, which means I'm choosing to rate my community 23%. So, well, decisions have been made.
No, they haven't. Subject to.
Subject to. Some decisions have been provisionally made. That means if we accept them, I'm either charging the community 23% to pay for them, or I'm using some of our income to pay it off, right? So the question isn't shall we use Agebrick or not, it's shall we use Agebrick or will our community pay 23%? Okay, so that's where I'm at. Not sure why you're snorting.
We can cut elsewhere. We can make other cuts.
So then I listened to Councillor Van Beek, and it's not a position that I am against. I have a great interest in selling down and paying down debt to save money. And I would be interested in you foreshadowing a different move on number 4, that we agree to something different, i.e. Paying down $40 million worth of debt out of our Agebrick portfolio, and to see what that would look like. Because actually that would be an intelligent conversation to have around the table now, rather than this binary vote on look good and don't vote for selling down assets, but actually end up charging my community more, but not actually exploring what is my calculations, and I did them over the last couple of weeks. I didn't bring them because I actually didn't think there was a lot of interest in that, but you've raised it. My calculations look to make a significant change, we'd need to pay down about $40 million worth of debt. That's when we start to see real difference in there. The reason that I didn't follow that any further is in 1 month from now, we're going to see a flood report that's going to look at the deep, and I feel like I need to support Councillor Williams a little. It rained, and I've woken up in a river too, Councillor Van Beek, so I understand how that feels. And I also know that when this flood review talks about $500 million, $1 billion, I don't know what it's going to cost to mean that we don't wake up in rivers. We need to be prepared as an organisation to be able to do it. So really what I'm saying, Chair, is I don't like the position I'm in to make decisions that actually don't really deal with the whole issue right now. And if I could, I'd say that we should have a break and talk some more, and we should talk about the questions about debt. But I don't think we have the opportunity for that. So I may just vote against it and say to my community, I didn't dip into your intergenerational fund. But really, I don't know that that leaves them any better off either. So I'm a bit like Councillor Foley. If there's going to be a vote, or maybe some other suggestions on the table from Councillor Van Beek around debt, then I'll have to make my decisions, I suppose, at that moment.
Thank you, Councillor Sears. Are there any other speakers who haven't spoken yet? And Councillor Roadley, would you like a right of reply?
Yes. Yes, but I actually do concur that if there is another suggestion that you'd like to put forward, I would be interested in exploring that also, Councillor Van Beek, around an alternate recommendation. I think I was actually in a very similar position to you with my thinking around whether we should be utilising or leveraging that dividend out of HBRIC to cover this cost. I'm actually comfortable with the cost is sitting there, unlike I know other councillors would rather it wasn't. I'm comfortable that it is. That is our work that we need to do as a council. I think as councillors, we are charged to listen and present the views of our community, and our community, via their submissions and through their voice, have loudly said they cannot afford the 23%. We actually went out at 29.6. They clearly said that is too much. This, to me, is a solution. It is not one that I particularly like, but this is a response, a pragmatic response to listening to what our community are telling us. And like Councillor Van Beek and like Councillor Foley have both indicated, there is an absolute call to bring this rate down for this year. It has been raining. It is the rainy day. It might not be the biggest rainy day we get. I also know that. But at the moment, our community are struggling. This is a pragmatic response. And just to clarify, Van Beek, that in questioning, I did test with Susie the financial impacts of borrowing the money rather than pulling it as a dividend, and she has given me confidence that this is the most prudent path forward, although it does seem counterintuitive. So yes, Chair, thank you. I am comfortable to confirm this recommendation. Okay. Subject to an alternate one.
Oh, no, we'll test this one. Okay. All those who agree, can you raise your hands, please?
I'm sorry, point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm actually going back to Councillor Curtin's point. All the decisions that have been made are actually still subject to confirmation.
Yes.
So we would be taking a vote on a dividend payment for things that actually yet haven't been confirmed. Really, you're going to go through.
Well,
Do I tie it all in a bow at the end?
Yeah, we tied it all in together.
Let's put the subject to the wrap up so we can see the full picture. In other words.
So what we have up here already is point 4. Now, Councillor Roadley was happy to move just point 4 first and then do a wrap up of everything after that.
They are contingent, absolutely. If we don't do those other, the 3.1, 3.2, we don't need the 2.8. So
okay.
Will's got his hand up.
Yeah. So
can we?
Councillor Roadley, can you just confirm what you are actually putting on the table here?
Number 4.
Yes.
Agrees to a request of a special dividend of 2.8 million from HBRIC and to apply it to.
Yes. Yes.
Carrying on. 1 million to the, what does it affect, the Hawke Bay Tourism one-off, the 1.2 for the remissions pool, the 250,000 to cover the review costs.
Thank you.
What about 4.3?
400,000 for
The 400,000 for biodiversity over 2 years, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I looked up there. That would be much easier.
Yeah. Okay, are we clear on that? Can the screen see? Councillor Foley?
Yeah, can we get the screen reshared? It came up and then disappeared.
Oh, okay, it's disappeared. So can we get recommendation up on the screen, please?
At the moment.
And do we need some words that say subject to?
I think it's okay.
No.
We've got all that?
It's sort of a circuitous argument.
Yeah, the 3.
Councillor Riley, just to confirm, we're on 4, and that's it.
Oh, well, 1, 2, 4.
1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 4.
Point 1, point 2, resolution 1, recommendation 1.
One, two, oh, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councillor Hokianga, you look confused. Oh, 6, 7, 8. Those against, please keep your hand up. 1, 2, 3. So that has passed and carried. Thank you. Would you like to note?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Yeah, against, please, Councillor Curtin, Councillor Van Beek and Councillor Foley. Thank you. Now, we still have to address points 3 and confirms the resolutions and and the additional motion that is not in your paper but is in the run sheet. Does everyone have? Desi, can you put that up, please?
Yeah. Number 5.
That's number 6. No, that's there.
Number 5.
Three and 5 to resolve.
Oh, thank you.
So 3 in the paper and 5 on the screen. Does that make sense?
There's something I want to raise
And
around
6.
3.1.
Okay, yes.
You all heard me in the way that I spoke about my disappointment around public transport at 3.1. I'm not clear how my vote was recorded in relation to that item, but my intention was that I could not put my name to 3.1. I understand the need to do that and for the other councillors to vote for it. I understand, but I'm not putting my name to it. But what I did do on that item and what was wanting to ensure that I was seen to support was the remissions package and the transport vote, which was under that item 3.2. So I'm not sure how my vote was recorded, and I'm wanting to make sure that this is tidied up. So we may need to split 3.1 out. That's kind of where I'm getting to, because I want to vote in favour of some of those other things, but not that.
Well, you
just put
you
3.1
have the choice to change your mind in that vote.
Well, no, I didn't change my mind. I said I can't support.
You can't support, and you voted against.
But I'm not sure what I did, to be honest.
Yet you voted against.
Right, well, that's fine, but I didn't want that. Well, that's all good.
Yep.
If I voted against 3.1,
It's fine, and that's recorded.
But I didn't want to vote against, to be seen to have, or have taken to have voted against 3.2, which was to do with the remission. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified on that earlier item.
So that's clarified there.
It's all good. Okay,
Thank
we're
you.
fine. Thank
I've got
you.
a question regarding 3.2 of the same item.
Yes.
So have we agreed, because it rushed fairly quickly afterwards, and I didn't see the words on the paper. The rates, is there just a normal rates remission policy will apply here, which they can by request 50%, or have we set a cap per ratepayer in that area of 200, and anything above that will be remitted. Can we have just clarification on that?
The latter, I think. The latter, I think.
The letter,
Okay,
the 200.
okay, yep.
Thank you. Any other points of clarification?
Yeah, well, maybe point of order. Chair, would I be able to suggest that for three that we just deal with them all individually? Because I have heard a range.
Yep, yeah, definitely.
range of
We can
views.
deal with them individually. That's fine.
you.
So we still have 3 to resolve. We also have 5 on the screen, which was the resolution to direct the CEO of organisational review before the next annual plan. And then remember, we've still got 6 on the paper that confirms the resolution of previous deliberations. Okay? So we have 3 items. So we'll start with number 3 and divide them out. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair.
So let's go through 3.1, which agrees to adopt the additional savings of public transport of 1.1 million in year 2 and 1.76 for year 3. Okay? So can we have a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Roadley, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harding, would you like to speak any further? We have discussed it as its own item, but you're in your right
I
to
think
speak.
there's been enough discussion.
Councillor Harding?
Yeah, look, just to note that it's a tragic situation we find ourselves in respect of public transport. And so we have year 1 assured. I would just hope that in the out years that we find an alternative solution where we can have a viable, growing public transport system. But that's not an option at the moment. Thank you.
Any further speakers? There are none. All those who agree with that, please raise your hands. So this is, so if you look at 3.1, agrees to adopt the additional savings for public transport. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those against? 1, 2, 2. And who would like to abstain?
Abstain.
Okay.
Be noted, please.
And yes, and the further abstain. Thank you.
I could have my vote noted as well. I'm sure it
Yes,
will be.
of course.
Said 2 abstains.
Councillor Van Beek abstains and Councillor Lambert was an abstain because I had no reaction.
His hand was up.
His hand was up.
The first.
So you agreed? Okay. Sorry, and abstain Councillor Hokianga? Yes, okay, 2 abstain, Councillor Van Beek and Councillor Hokianga. So that has passed. Let's go to 3.2, the staff costs, 5 additional vacancies, resulting in 20 vacancies on hold for 3 years. Okay, so who would like to move that? Councillor Sears, thank you, and Councillor McIntosh second. Would you like to speak any further?
Only to comment that we're now at 7% staff reductions
Yes, thank you for
in the
highlighting that.
organisation, so acknowledging that.
Thank you. Councillor
Look, I
McIntosh?
think I covered it off with some of the things I said earlier, Chair.
Thank you. Any further speakers?
Yeah, there is something I want to share about this. And I know that there is a very strong drive and concern from our community around staff levels that's shared around this table. Is shared universally around this table, actually, but some feel more strongly about it than others. Can I just ask us to put this in context, however? And as I said the other day, you're in fantasy land if you think we could have got through the cyclone on 250 staff, and our staff were asked by our rate-paying community, them specifically, to do the work of 1,000 people last year. And I asked, how could we have repaired 64 kilometres of stop bank, negotiated over $200 million of Crown funding for greater flood resilience, and secured funding to administer the removal of 3 million tonnes of silt from orchards and lifestyle blocks, and negotiated unprecedented funding for our transport infrastructure, as well as being at the forefront of the cyclone response and doing a whole bunch of work outside the job description, and certainly outside the hours, engaging with hundreds of distressed landowners on 250 staff. And I see very little, if any, credit given to this. It's just all about we're a big, large, bloated whale, to use someone else's terms, forgive me, and we need to cut our cloth. And I think the problem is, if you just give me a couple of minutes here, please, people don't see us picking up the rubbish or fixing potholes in the roads, right? They don't see us putting new swings in the parks. And maybe we don't sell our story well enough, but go and have a look at the board outside on your way out of here, and have a look at everything that our staff do. You know, the largest increases in staff since 2009 have actually been in environmental science. So that's positioning us to add the very best outcomes, which everyone's keen on, through our regulatory intervention. Do we just simply put blanket rules saying fence your streams or imposing water bans, or do we target those to where the science tells us they would have the greatest impact? Could we have picked up alligator weed or Senegal tea if we didn't have the investment in the eDNA technology? The other biggest area of staff increases was in asset management. Could we have secured $20 million of IRG funding in the middle of the COVID lockdown? Think what that was like. We were operating on Teams and Zoom, and there was Chris and his team with James in the dark, basically, in an absolute storm of activity with days to do it, putting their hand up for some flood protection, which meant that Cyclone Gabriel, and I do not take for 1 second the impact that that had on you, Councillor Van Beek. I apologise if that's the way that that came across. That was, I'm not saying it wasn't raining, but that disaster would have been a catastrophe if it weren't for us having done that work. Could we have had the bandwidth to do that on 250 staff? And now we're needing to position ourselves not only to stand up the biggest rollout of infrastructure this organisation's ever done with the money that we secured through the negotiations that Susie's team led, and we're also going to have to then work beyond that to do something that we haven't seen before in terms of the recommendations of our independent reviews, and you know, a likely even greater scale to the 250 million, which is already unprecedented. So yes, we are setting up our organisation, and I believe through our rating reviews and through the HBRIC reset and the financial strategy and the longer term dividend to get rates down, and through our effectiveness reviews to make sure that we optimise the return and empower our communities to help us with biodiversity and climate change adaptation. But don't pretend for a minute that the staff in this organisation don't add value. They add enormous value, and to say that rates increases are unsustainable, well, let's use that word a little bit in some other contexts. How is it sustainable in biodiversity terms to cut spending on that? How is it sustainable in erosion control terms for our rivers and our sea to cut spending on that? How is it sustainable in terms of emissions to cut public transport? How is it sustainable in terms of flood resilience to be enabled to have done everything that we just did, that I've talked about in terms of better protecting our communities? So just lay off the staff a bit, please, communities, and think about actually what this organisation has to confront. And perhaps we need to do a better job of selling the value of this organisation and the rates that we take out of people's pockets for the benefit of current and future generations and the environment collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to use the word total, but I'm not going to use the word total with what Councillor Williams has just mentioned. Because we've got some really hard-working staff, some really clever people. We've also got some very pragmatic people in amongst our staff. But I believe in the Pareto distribution, that the larger you grow a organisation, you will have those that produce 10% generally of a number, produce all the work. And so it is time for us to really look close. And we heard from one of the submitters that when we had smaller amount of staff, one staff member driving up their drive occasionally and they were a real great help. And they said, now they're actually getting in our way. So there's definitely room for us to really look close in what we do. And often it is, unless you actually see the reality of things, staff and we as governors, we have lost that focus, I believe. And so I believe what Councillor Williams is saying is absolutely right, but it starts from the top, and it starts from us as councillors as well. And hopefully in this coming year, and that's what we've been promised, we're actually going to have a really good look, and hopefully we are able to give you, Madam Chair, direction to talk to our CE about where we should be landing. Possibly it should have been done last year, but there are good reasons why we didn't. Last year was always better than this coming year, but we should not falter, and we should not go weak on the knees either on that. So that's where I sit. Totally support with the work that we do. Biosecurity to me is never an area where we should cut costs. We should possibly invest more because it's coming faster at us due to climate change, and we need to protect our rohi better than we have in the past. So that's where my focus would be, and that's not a luxury idea that I think it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foley.
This is this is not our money. It's not my money. It's not the chair's money. It's not the CE's money. It's the ratepayers' money. It's the ratepayers' organisation. That's the first thing I want to say. No one's saying the staff aren't doing a good job, but can we bring together an army waiting for the next earthquake, the next cyclone, whatever it is? We can always bring in extra resource when we need to. That's why we have reserve funds. But we can do things more effectively and more efficiently, and that's why this review coming up is so important. But no, I don't believe anyone's saying the staff haven't done a good job reacting to the cyclone or doing this or doing that. But the financial sustainability of this organisation and this region is just as important. There's so many more things we could do. So the counter argument would be is where do we stop? There has to be a point that's sustainable in every way, including financial. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Councillor Curtin, then Councillor Rodley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It always is a tough call, a conundrum, looking at staff numbers and then reflecting on the overall business that we're in. And my concern here is that we don't let, there are tough decisions to be made, and I think the plan itself and out for consultation highlighted the reality that these were tough calls to make. My view is that it's not about the staff, it's about the level of service that we offer, and we experienced an exponential growth in delivery and the level of service that we wanted to provide. The staff numbers had to accompany that, and now it's time to reflect and say that has gone further than our ratepayers can afford to pay. That's just the reality. It's sad, and certainly not my desire to borrow those funds to pay for the current. I think I've already said that. But let's not put our rosy-coloured spectacles on and think that we can continue to grow exponentially, to deliver those services as we have in the last half a decade, and expect the ratepayer to fund that. They can't. We're talking on average, that sort of 16, 17%. That's only the tip of the iceberg. For large numbers of people, that rate increase is 120, 150, 200%. It's simply not affordable, and it's our job to match community expectations, the ability of the community to pay, with the level of service that we can provide. It's not about the staff involved. It's about cutting our cloth, as it's been said on a number of occasions, to deliver efficiently and effectively. And we've got reviews that say potentially we can do better in that regard. Reviews coming. But in the meantime, we've got to manage within the resources available. And if that means we can't deliver everything at once, if it can't deliver on environmental outcomes as quickly as we want, then so be it. That's just the world the way it is. And I don't think we can resile from making those cuts in areas, examining our business at length and in detail, and responding accordingly. That's what the business world has to face, and we're no different than that. And I think we should just get on and do it.
Councillor Rodley.
Thank you, Chair. The motion on the table to reduce staff costs via holding the 5 vacancies for a further 3 years, I cannot support. However, I feel like we're actually preempting the outcomes of the efficiency review that we have agreed to undertake before the annual plan discussions, and I would be comfortable, for that to be for 1 year only, not preempting that the efficiency review could show that we need more staff, but it might also prove we need less staff, and I feel like holding it for 3 years is actually counterintuitive to embarking on an efficiency review. So can I move that as an alteration to this?
As an amendment?
Amendment to this, can I do that? The 3 years, reducing it to a single year, given these are just vacancies, we're not,
Want to see what that does to them.
do we need to let that fly first and then?
Well, I'm just going to go back to the mover, so councillor Sears.
I was going to, in my right of reply, make the point, Madam Chair, that you have to be careful what you wish for, because indeed the efficiency reviews may well show that we need more staff, not less. That could happen. We don't know that because we haven't been involved in going through those departments. So I'd be interested in the Chief Executive's response. I mean, I was a little confused with some of the comments because this is to reduce staff and to hold them, not to grow the organisation. Like I say, that was my point at the beginning, will be 7% staff less.
Yeah.
But in Chief Executive, if our efficiency reviews found that departments actually were undercooked, how would this recommendation then play into that?
I think we would still be able to hold a number of vacancies. I think if you decided to do this for 1 year, essentially we'd need to put that funding back into the model in years 2 and 3. What you could do is to give it suggest that an amendment that said something like staff costs 5 additional vacancies, resulting in 20 vacancies on hold for 3 years, subject to the outcome of the review, the efficiency and effectiveness reviews. Yes. And that means you can go either way, depending on what they tell us. But it won't alter your numbers in the plan.
I would be happy with that amendment, just subject to any other comments.
Do you have a second?
I'm the seconder.
The seconder, and are you happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Change.
All right. Any further comments? I'm going to have to bring it down to 1 minute each.
Yeah.
Okay, for these amendments?
This is just a question by way of clarification as to whether the need for that amendment, because I'm looking at the table in 38, and the vacancies are only in year 1. So I'm trying to understand why, if they carry through the 3 years, why they wouldn't feature across all 3 years in that table.
Okay.
So maybe staff can answer
clarification
that.
on that? Was this intended for year 1 only?
Through you, Chair, the funding effect is only in year 1. Is how I would understand this. So just check with the CFO.
Yeah. In the tables that I've been presenting, it's reducing the total rate as per the LTP, so you have to reduce the 400 in each of the years. It's not a cumulative thing. Some of the rate models that we were looking at previously were a cumulative thing where we started at the rates from the previous year and then decreased more. This is starting at a consistent point, and therefore you have to take it off every year.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're holding with, subject to reviews. Okay?
Yeah.
If there are no further comments, we'll put that to the table. All those who agree, raise your hand, please. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all 11. Thank you. We move to 3.3, sponsorship and contributions. Can I please have a mover for that recommendation?
Happy to move.
Happy to move. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Foley. Councillor Curtin, would you like to speak to that?
Oh, Madam Chair, go back to the proposition that there are things that we can definitely reduce, and I know it's a small quantum, and I believe that we can actually do this without too much impact out in the big wide world. It's just another cost that ratepayers have to bear that we can skip this time and look to the future, the next plan, and decide whether we want to participate in these sorts of sponsorship arrangements.
Okay, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Beek.
No,
Yes,
I wasn't the
Speaker.
seconder.
Oh,
Somebody else
sorry.
was.
Well, Councillor Foley. Sorry, it's because Councillor Van Beek put his hand up. I thought,
Make
oh,
one
no,
make a
he
comment.
wasn't the seconder. Councillor Foley.
Oh, just echo those comments. It's a small value, but I don't think it's going to have a big impact out in the community, and they'll understand. So just happy to second.
Okay. Any further speakers? Councillor Williams and then
Yeah,
Harding.
look, I actually think this would be churlish, which is defined as rude in a mean-spirited way, in the sense that it's a big fingers to the community that we interact with and we ask to do a huge amount in terms of sustainability in the way that they operate their businesses, and I think we make a huge impact in the community. I was at the Port Awards the other day, and I think our presence in the Balanced Farm Awards, those sorts of things, is really important. And in terms of being seen to support good outcomes within the business community for environmental reasons. So I don't think the saving's worth the reputational impact.
Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, as I spoke to earlier on, I think the power of this small investment is leveraged many-fold through the work that it generates and the energy that it generates around environmental outcomes. And so I think churlish is one word. I would simply say it's irrational to cut this because it goes to the heart of a very effective engagement.
Thank you. Councillor Van Beek.
There is a positive, however. If they true to their who they are, they should stop inviting us to these, and it would save us a lot of time having to turn up and drive long ways to Wairau and whatnot. But at the same time, I think most of these organisations, they actually are in line with our core business, is at arm's length. And if we, in most of those cases, they are the pinnacle of the primary industries, and often they share on these field days, and I haven't been to them for a year and a half, unfortunately now, due to being a little bit busy. They often share really good ideas on how we actually can improve the rohi on individual farms, and it's not just only about profit. Often it is they actually take us to some really cool places on their farms where they've actually done some amazing stuff. So I appreciate that we're trying to find ways to save, but unfortunately I'm not going to support this.
Okay. Any further speakers? Councillor Rodley.
Yes, aroha mai, Mr Maxwell, this was painful, I can tell. I definitely would not support this recommendation. This is actually our opportunity to show the community that we do care about those people who are creating success in these core business activities. It also creates an opportunity for us to engage farmer to farmer, landholder to landholder. We know this is how people learn best. What is leveraged off this very small quantum of money needs to be retained within our organisation. Thank you.
Thank you. Am right of reply?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just would regard it as rude and churlish and a middle finger to ratepayers to not take opportunities like this to reduce the burden on them.
Okay, thank you. At $65,000 in the connections, the contributions that we make with these communities and this industry, I also can't support this motion. So we will put it to the table. All those who agree, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. And all those against? The remainder. So that has failed. We move on to 3.4, agrees to adopt the additional savings through pest management bait subsidies of $185,000. That's pretty straightforward in its description. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the saving?
I'm happy to move.
Councillor Harding, and a seconder. Councillor Sears, would you like to speak, Councillor Harding?
No, nothing to add, thank you.
No. Councillor Sears?
Only to say that I'd like to see this tied to some really good comms out to our farmers around it and asking them to pick up the slack on this in terms of acknowledging the lack of the discount, but the requirement for the work to continue, and their need to stump up in terms of unsubsidised pest control.
Thank you very much. Any further speakers? Councillor Foley?
Yeah, look, on the surface, this isn't obviously a great proposal and I wouldn't normally support it, but I think to Councillor Van Bake's point around those that have received either significant decreases or no increases in their rates, generally they fall into this same category of people that would be utilising this bait subsidy. So I think in this case, it's probably okay to support this for the next 3-year plan at least anyway.
Thank you. No right of reply. Oh, Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Mr Maxwell, I feel the blood on the page on this item, and I wonder what the consequences of, if we accepted this money back into the pool as such, if we did propose to discontinue the possum bait subsidy and the plant pest incentive scheme, given that we have increased funds in our biodiversity and our biosecurity to maintain it at that level. We've also had a more democratised cost structure via the revenue and finance policy, which shares that burden across, and the sharing of the costs of actual what I would call chalk face work on the ground. Those farmers are getting more support from the wider community. Mr Maxwell, what would be the consequences of us saying, thank you very much, we will discontinue those 2 programs, but offer it back to you by way of action and leverage into the Land for Life program, which is one of our key programs that we will see far wide-reaching impact across our rohi? What would be the impact of that? Sorry, put you on the spot.
We usually don't do the question, but quick.
I know, I'm sorry.
quick
I'm just
answer.
thinking through what I'm going to vote on this one.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about repurposing it back into that program, probably the one area that I would say that we've been in Land for Life that we've been incredibly deficient on because we've lacked the resources to do it is the engagement piece. So we've just not been able to engage effectively both with the pilot farmers that we've worked on in the creation of the project. So that's one area that would immediately be resolved, and it would also allow, my reaction would be to put it into that engagement, into an engagement role that would accelerate the uptake of the 90 and the validation to scale piece. That's the piece that will make it go faster.
So what I'm hearing is if I do not support this saving, you would have the ability to discontinue those programs and accelerate the impact of Land for Life?
No, if you did support the savings.
No, because if we support it, we're pulling it out.
Okay.
If we don't support it, we're leaving it in.
Yeah, these are subsidies, pest
Right,
management
no,
bait
correct.
subsidies.
No, I thought you meant
Yes.
I got that wrong?
No, I thought you meant diverting from one to the other, but that was all.
It needs to stay in for Mr Maxwell to be able to utilise
I see.
which is a little bit counterintuitive. I got that right, did you?
So I
Is that
think,
clear?
if I understand the proposition, as you're saying that the position of council would be to discontinue the subsidy approach,
Yeah.
in that.
To
then-
leave the 185,000 in
And the
your,
question would subsequently be,
oh,
well, how would that money be repurposed if it was pointed towards Land for Life, which is the engagement piece?
I think council would have to give some direction on that rather than
Yeah,
just
yeah.
say
Okay.
no.
All right.
checking I need to vote now to make
Can I
that
speak?
Yes, you
possible.
can speak.
I'll try and be really brief. Look, this is going from fat to muscle to bone, if you ask me. I don't want to have my name on anything to do with taking support away from possums control. We've decided they're a biodiversity pest. They're not like nutrients that are regulated or water that's regulated where the cost has to be borne by the farmer, and our rates relief kicks in to help with some of that, I think. Farmers don't ask for possums to come on their property, TB or otherwise. And we as a region benefit from this. And the prospect that we could have a significant increase in future control issues for pest plants or an increase in possum numbers across the region for 180 grand, no thanks.
So what we're voting on is the savings of pest management bait subsidies, okay? So they're the subsidies. All right, if there are no further speakers, all those who agree with that motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Three?
Can't see Charlie's hand.
Are you raising it, Charlie, or no? No. Okay. That's 3. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's fail and abstain, councillor Van Beek. Okay. So those subsidies stay in place, which will do exactly, so we're going to have a change in the spreadsheet?
No, so we're still at 16%.
No, we're still the same. Okay, thank you. Still at 16. All right. We have 2 more items to get through. The first is confirms the resolutions made in previous deliberations and also directs.
Excuse me, Chair, I think I've made a mistake. I actually, sorry, table.
Would you like to change your vote?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so you agreed, but you did not agree.
Yeah.
Well, it failed anyway.
It failed anyway.
So, yeah, I just want to change my vote.
Okay.
please. It still fails.
Can you? Yeah, it still fails. Thank you.
Change my vote.
All right, so we have confirms the previous resolutions made in previous deliberation items, okay? We also have the directs the CE, so it's on the screen, directs the CE to conduct reviews of efficiency and effectiveness in line with the council's strategic priorities in time for the next annual plan. So we've discussed that at length. So please do not ask the same questions or say the same things. And we have those 2 to get through as we
Is it have we got all of 6.1 there? Is it?
Oh, yeah, so I have summarised the
So she
resolutions.
summarised all
that's everything
the
we've done
previous
so far.
resolutions.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so we don't need to read all that again.
No.
Yes, we want to.
So I just want to check that everyone is crystal clear on the items that we have already provisionally agreed upon. Okay?
Sorry, how do you want to look at it?
Right. Let's start from the top, Dizzy. So a reminder of our flood mitigation schemes, a 70-30 split for flood protection. We have Wairoa, O&M, Whirinaki Industrial Capital and O&M. Yep. Whirinaki Other, just O&M. Heretaunga Plains, Capital and Operating. Parongaho Operating and Maintenance. We have 100% general rate funding for Parongaho Capital, 100% general rate for Whirinaki other capital, and 100% general rate funding for the share of general works. Okay, that seems correct to me. Move through it. 6.2 agrees to the 1.3 million in CDM targeted rate. Move down. 6.3 agrees to the proposed savings through the public transport rate of 1.1 and 1.76 million.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
It seems to have dropped off our screen again,
Oh, sorry.
if you're reading it from a screen. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. 6.5 agrees to maintain funding for Hawke's Bay tourism of 1.52 million for the first year.
And just a point of clarification on that, Chair, so the amount that was coming from HBRIC for
Yes.
that, I think, was $1 million.
Yes.
So we're saying the additional comes from rates.
Yes, because we had already proposed that
500.
for year one. Yes. 6.7 to stop the clean heat grants and loans, sustainable home loans program from July this year. 6.8, reduce funding for landowners through the erosion control scheme. And bring back the biodiversity and biosecurity program funding of 400,000.
Yep.
Yes?
It's 1 and 2, correct.
Yes. 6.9, retain the annual contribution to Te Mata Park Trust of 120,000. 6.9, agrees to adopt the infrastructure strategy. 6.10, agrees no changes to be made to the 3-year plan in relation to the submissions requesting financial assistance.
We stop at 6.9, Chair. I thought we'd passed a resolution that we would support the Aotearoa industry group or continue to support it, and that would be reported back to the EICC. You'll find.
Okay, I do remember us discussing it. I'm not sure if it was a motion that was
It was a
actually
motion.
moved.
Yes, it was.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we please have that added in? Thank you for spotting that, Councillor Williams.
Let's put Aotearoa resolution.
Thank you. 6.11 agrees to adopt the amended fees and charges policy, including the implementation of 2 new harbour masters.
Sorry, 6.11, we did also have a motion there that we acknowledge the good work that those groups do. I think that was in there too, for the funding requests.
Yes.
Just put the acknowledge contribution resolution or something.
Thank you. 6.12 agrees to adopt option C, 50% remission for 1 year of local councils only.
Yeah.
Okay, can we move through that? 6.13 agrees to undertake a further review of rating of the Upper Tukituki flood control scheme and the Upper Makara stream catchment before the next annual plan.
And Chair, 6.13 needs to have the review of the potential 1 million.
And the impact on residential lifestyle properties.
Chair, I think we skipped over about 6.12 or 6.11, and actually the wording said something about 2 new harbour master, which.
Oh, sorry, fees.
Fees.
And, sorry, 6.13, we also agreed to progress an RFP evaluation of a $100 million cap.
Oh, a capping, yes, a review of capping.
Just on 6.14, I think there's a clarity of wording. Let me get to that one.
Which one? Oh. When do you want to do that?
I can do that when you
Okay,
get to it.
16.14, Nick.
6.14, Mr. Dolly just reminded me that what we're doing is essentially looking at the banding in the upper Tuki and the upper Makarara scheme. We're not looking at whether
Yes, the banding, correct.
it should be the whole
I was about to
RFP.
say, it's going to end up with a whole.
Chris, do you have a sensible word to insert in that one?
I think, the intent, it's not a full rating review, it's a looking at the banding. I think if we use the word like banding, it will be clear what we're doing.
Yes.
Was the differential rating
Yes.
banding or something like that? Yep.
Banding use and differential rating, yeah.
Thank you. Let's move forward. And that's it. And then today's decisions that we've already made.
Can I just have a clarification on 6.3? Can I have that?
6.3.
Doesn't actually talk about the detail of the remission, because that could mean that you could read that either way, whether that will be just the remission policy or.
You mean that the conditions or criteria?
Yeah, the cap that we actually have put in place.
I think it's something like for people that are new to the footprint with an increase of over $200.
Yes. Yep. A 50% remission. Yeah. Those details in there? It wasn't previously.
Yeah.
It wasn't previously, but we want to add that. Okay. So, and that's what was discussed in principle, agreed upon when we did that. Oh. Okay, so that brings together confirms the resolutions.
Can we go to 5, please?
And resolution 5 around the directing the CEO around the organisational reviews, yes. If we're happy to move on to resolution 5, what would you like to say, Councillor Foley?
Oh, just while we're in the mode of rewording things, is there a chance to reword that? Directs the chief executive to administer reviews of efficiency and effectiveness accountable to governance. Is that a better way to put it?
We want to include governance in there. Is that the aim?
Oh, I'm just suggesting it's, yeah.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, I'm always accountable to governance. I think it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just have a point of clarification on that also too, Chair? So that's, that process enables us to potentially have an effect on 18% next year.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That is the aim.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. So we confirm this part of the process in terms of submissions, and then it goes forward to the July meeting for adoption.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah, the trouble I'm having with where we've got to now and the structure that we've got is that a number of those items I'm being now asked to confirm that I agree with them when previously I don't. How do we?
I guess it would be helpful, Nick, if you can outline why we need to agree to these today to adopt in a future extraordinary meeting, and then therefore before the rating year ends.
So I think, yes, that has to occur. I think, understanding Councillor Curtin's question, because there have been individual votes against each of the resolutions, a catch-all resolution at the end potentially goes into conflict with resolutions taken earlier where members have got a different view.
Can't we just have a resolution that preserves our votes on the individual items?
I would have thought that's the way to do it.
I was thinking the same thing, that we could all vote because this has all been carried to pass that, but it's while preserving our votes on the individual decision items.
That's right, exactly what we've done for revenue and financing policy, because you do have to work through these components to get to an end point. So we have five and six there. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for those?
Oh, it just will be the 10th of July.
Sorry, the 10th of July. That's the only change. Councillor Williams, you're happy to move. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Roadley. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Williams?
30 seconds. I think
30.
this is best of a bad job situation. The challenges are immense, and I do think that we've struck some sort of a balance, very, very difficult one, between the need to continue to fund what we have to do and to take steps through these reviews, acknowledging all of the work that our staff do to ensure that we are the most effective we can be for the future, and that the trend is not an ever-increasing one of increasing staff and increasing complexity in a world that is increasingly complex and difficult to deal with. So I'd just like to thank everyone involved here. This isn't easy, and it ain't going to get any easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roadley.
Just to reiterate what Councillor Williams has said, and that none of these decisions have been made lightly. They have been all debated at length, and we've arrived at this place, so happy to second them.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Van Dyke.
Yeah, I won't support this resolution. As my record will show, I've been against most of the recommendations in our early deliberations. I still believe, and I'll say it again, we have a rating structure that rates the wrong people for the wrong reasons, and the wrong reason is because they can't afford it. Well, if you talk to the submitters and read what they have submitted, there are so many people who live in our towns that are retired, have only got a single income, and we have moved the rate burden from the rohi, the area where we do most of our work, we're an environmental organisation, to the burden has gone to town and those with large investments. And I totally disagree with that, and therefore I cannot support it. Mm-hmm. And the reason also is that if you compare why some people have got large capital value compared to land value, is because they have chosen to do a more, less destructive operation on the land. And I can go for ages, and I won't, some of my councillors' colleagues do that. I won't go there. I just cannot go and support this. It's the wrong rating group that is actually being heavily burdened by what we're proposing, so I can't support it.
Thank you for your position, Councillor Van Beek. Councillor Foley, thank you.
I feel like singing a song. It's 2021 all over again. Back then, we said, no, we can't take that out, we can't take that out. We kept adding things back in. And then to compensate, we borrowed money. This time it feels like we've done the same thing, except we're drawing on HBRIC. I just can't, I'll never forget now the engagement I've had, or just had, with my constituents, which was one of high emotion. And we've heard through the last 2 days, these deliberations, oh, it's $10 here, it's $20 there. Well, I've had people at that level of increase on their knees saying, how can we survive? Because it's not just that. It's another $50 a week of their district council rates. It's another $50 a week of their insurance. I just don't think we've listened enough and reacted enough. We could have done more, particularly around the organisational structure, but we didn't. And then we said, okay, we'll take all this other stuff off, and then it feels like we just added it all back on. And still just, I guess, for my area, just unsure of the whole Apatuki scheme around the remissions. Like, that's obviously all in control of staff now. The hardship test, case by case basis. Like, yeah, just how's that going to go? It's obviously not up to me from this point. So I'm just, yeah, just really, I guess, disappointed where we've ended up from, particularly from the point of view of my constituents. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. What I'd say is that from a pretty lumpy starting point in terms of a big increase in year one and only a slightly smaller increase in year two on the back of a revenue and financing policy review that achieved quite a lot of lumpiness, quite a lot of large impacts around the edges and quite a large minority of people being differentially affected. I think the combination of decisions that we've reached addresses most, if not all, of the major pain points. In particular, we've got, whilst some of the processes that we've agreed to address the pain points take a little time, scheme footprint reviews for public transport, ratings differentials for Apatuki, we have processes in place that will deliver better outcomes for year two. Meantime, in year one, we have a set of remissions policies that will help to address the worst of those impacts at the edges. Look, I just want to speak, and finally, to Geoff's concerns really focused on capital value, and I don't want to open up, we are not opening up that LV to CV decision again. Yes, there was a redistribution. No, I did not support the amount of redistribution. It came on top, and to validate Geoff's observations around the mismatch between where most of it, a large portion of the council's money and the ratepayers' money is invested versus who's paying for it. There is a differential. But there was a long process that councillors went through with good advice that landed on that position, and it is based, there's more of an equity and more of a distribution of benefits. I don't entirely agree with it, but it was arrived at for valid reasons. Some of the impacts, particularly on the horticultural sector, in fact, most of the impacts, they're not actually capital value impacts. They're the combination of other things. And I did the analysis, I wrote on it, we were provided with the income. Actually, for the Heretaunga Plains, CV actually reduced horticultural rates by itself, that one change, by 3%. Right? So it's not the overriding problem, it's the combination of all those things. Right? So we just need to really, and we've done a good job of unpicking most of those levers today, so I think it leaves us in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I can be afforded a minute or two here, this has been an intriguing process. We've been through the deliberations and the lead up to them, and in these circumstances, I look at time and place and think, gosh, all these decisions and each long-term plan I've been through reflects the time and place, and it's always a tough call to make decisions because there's always a good reason not to make a hard decision. I am and was drawn to the comment made by, and a great observation by Councillor McIntosh, in fact, when he described the position he was taking around adopting the ratepayers' perspective and before being on council and after, and being subject to the detail, and that enabled, and from a ratepayer's perspective, yes, you're seeing the world from the limited information that you have either available or are interested in, and therefore you'll draw your conclusions. The detail having been shared enables one to draw a conclusion about value and value for money, and yes, I will write that cheque because I'm getting good value. It's a bit of a double-edged sword for me, Madam Chair, because the detail, I also know the detail on the other side. I do know that we could have done better. We could have, in fact, reviewed our business much more diligently than we did. And I'm interested in the views of the Chief Executive when he says that it is his position, his prerogative to, if you like, look at the business and come back with a view on it. But at the same breath we got on the way through, you didn't tell us what to cut. And I find that a conflict of position, that councillors were expected to come forward with the cuts or recommendations for cut, when in fact we ought to have started 6 months or so ago, the executive team itself. And this is where I think we have a shortfall in leadership, both at a governance and a leadership perspective, where we both, I think, fell short of doing our job properly. One, the executive not bringing forward, looking at the situation as a whole and making recommendations to us that brought about very substantial cuts that would avoid us actually having to go to the war chest and sell some silver to pay for our operations. And then on our side, we've gone along and added back in. One of the things that concerns me, Madam Chair, is a notion that somehow every dollar doesn't count. They're not our dollars, they're the ratepayers' dollars, and every dollar counts. So therefore, when we come to consideration, for example, around things nice to have, such as sponsorship and the like, then even though it's a small quantum, it's a ratepayer dollar, it's not our dollar. And I think we ought to have been much more, if you like, or less cavalier with the ratepayers' dollars than we should have. Finally, Madam Chair, some of the things that concern me on the way through during the process are around accountability. You wanted me to wind up, Madam Chair?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Well, just to finish then, the accountability notion, what struck me is our preparedness to accept, we are rating for the ratepayer, we're rating from the ratepayer, and yet we treat dollars going through, for example, civil defence, and for entities like Hawke's Bay Tourism, we are prepared or think that they are pass-throughs, that we don't have a say or are not accountable. We are accountable for those dollars, and my view is that we ought to have had much stronger, if you like, guardrails for those ratepayers' dollars going through. And I'm really, really concerned that at the end of the day, we make the same mistake we made in 2021. We are borrowing for operational expenditures. We shouldn't be doing that.
Thank you,
Madam
Councillor
Chair.
Curtin. Councillor Seves.
I think I've said enough today.
Yep.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Roadley? No. Councillor Williams?
Just to reply briefly, look, 35%. Do you want to speak first?
Should
Yeah,
I?
Councillor McIntosh, sorry.
I just want to say three brief things, really. Nobody likes the situation we're in. Nobody likes it. It doesn't. We're not uncaring about what the difficulty people have with paying the rate. So nobody likes that. Where we're at now, we're certainly in the Hawke's Bay context, but probably in a national context, we're right at the lower end of the spectrum of rate increases. So I think we all agree and disagree with various things that have occurred, but I think we can take some comfort, if that's the right word, that actually where we've arrived at is a very competitive situation relative to other rate increases. And alongside that, we've signalled very clearly to our CE that we want a very hard look at how efficient and effective we are over the next little while, with a view to pulling that 18% proposed in year 2 back. So for me, of course, there are aspects of this I'm uncomfortable with. I think actually we've ended up in not a bad space, and I'm sort of happy with where we're at.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. And before you close, Councillor Williams, I do want to thank you all as governors and as staff for the hard work and actually well-considered thought that has gone into this consultation process. We've pulled every lever we can through these reports, and we've come up at a pragmatic place that it's not a position we want to be in, but it's actually one we've been very thoughtful of and in the face of democracy have done all we can. So thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, I just want to say, we started this at 35%. We've ended up with 16%. We all need to look in the mirror here. We were asked for direction. We were asked what we wanted to focus on, what our strategic direction. We were given the results we asked for. And for those who are wanting to vote against this motion, you need to look in the mirror just as I am. Because you can't just put problems on the table, you need to put solutions on the table. And in the absence of those solutions, I think we've arrived at, as I said before, probably the best of a bad job. And I can only beg that central government actually listens to the crisis that local government is in, because this pressure is being felt by all of us across the nation. We are not alone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So those motions are on table 5 and 6. All those who agree, can you raise your hand, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against? 1, 2, 3, and that has passed. Thank you all. We have gone over time again, but very worthy and well-considered conversation and decision-making on behalf of all our people in the region. In that, can I please have Councillor Handy lead us in closing our karakia? Thank you. To get out the app.
Give me a moment.
Chair, also, thank you for the last couple of days. Thanks for chairing. It's been
Welcome.
a big, I think it's been 10 hours now.
11 hours. Oh, and another invitation from the staff to join the Matariki celebration in the staff room. They are having a hangi for lunch at 12:30.
Today?
Oh, today.
Today.
Hey, karakia tātou, we're going to do ina here, because that's my preference, and you've given me the... So, if... I'll give people a moment just to find it if they want on their app. But anyway, those of us who are familiar with it will go. So, ina here, ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takatā. Koia rā e rongo, whakaaeria ake kia rongo. Kia tina,
E tai kia. Kia ora koutou. Thank you everyone on screen. Thank you. Kia ora koutou.